Hi, everybody, and welcome to the blessed mess that is this podcast. My name is Jessie Francis, and the reason for this, which I think is pretty good to state since this is the first podcast in the series, is I'm a mom, I'm a woman. Obviously, those two kind of go together most of the time. Um, and I kind of feel like I have a bunch of stuff to say, both on those two subjects, but also just advice on, we're going to be talking about a lot of beauty issues, spiritual issues. What is being a Christian mother? What is being a Christian woman or woman in general? Geez. And also, basically, where I'm coming from is this past year has been one of those life changer things for me. Not in so much my own faith or anything like that. I mean, it has been. I've grown very, very much closer to God, I think, as we all do when we go through crises in any way. A lot of people have been asking me after things happened last year when my son got leukemia. How do you do it? Oh my goodness, we admire you so much. And gee, I mean, seriously. Um, I'm like, good Lord. Do you see me every day? I don't think so, with the insane mess that is my house. There's always dishes, there's always laundry that needs to be done. How many days a week do I make beds? Not sure. It doesn't always happen. I'm just, I think we all kind of have this crazy mess going on, whether it is life and death, fighting for your children. My son was going on 5 when he got leukemia. He is about a little bit more than a year into it now, and turning 6 this Halloween. He's a really big boy, or trooper. I mean, it's been a life and death fight, a huge struggle, and life just kind of stops, whether you have a child that has leukemia, or depending on if you're going through a horrible time at work, or self-loathing, or issues with your relationships, whatever you're going through, everything is life and death, whether it is actually like, okay, this is life or death, somebody might die. There's always that feeling of your heart and your soul, of feeling that's at stake, because life around us tends to just sort of it's just sort of like a machine. You have your things that you have every week, your school, work, routines, things that have to happen, where you don't have a choice. You need to work, you need to bring in money, you need to take your children to football, you need to do whatever it is you do every week. Everybody does different stuff. You don't have that much of a choice. And a lot of times I think it's so easy to just get caught up in that and forget where our heart is. And that in itself, that's a life and death situation as well. With Elliot, it was ended last August. I was at work. I had a really, really rough spring and summer at the job I was at. Relationships with certain people in the workplace that were just really difficult. And I think, as far as seeing the big picture for us, we don't. I mean, most of the time, I think for most of us, we're pretty self-centered. I'm just speaking out of experience here. We can be pretty self-centered. I mean, our little movie of our lives, where we're, the main character, everything gets so big and everything gets so blown up. And I'm not saying that it has to be, super serious, but for me, where I was at the time with my job, I was going through a really, really rough patch. And that in itself led me to become closer to God. It helped me to be more attentive to worship and to what is God, how are you gonna, what are you saying to me right now? I am in such a bad place and I can't get through this on my own. I have no idea how I should relate to this person to make the best of the situation, diffuse the situation, And at the same time, it's like, okay, I could just do nothing. I could just, not say anything about how this person is acting. It was somebody that was making everybody around them feel pretty bad about themselves. And they were in a leadership position, and it's just it was just a really, really tricky situation. And I think in all of that, I felt really lost. And I really turned to God. I mean, as we always do. You look back at the Bible and it's like Old Testament, Israel's doing awesome, and they kind of fall away from God. Then something happens, and they get drawn back. They're like, oh my goodness, we can't do this on our own. We need help. And God comes through, as he always does. And I think that's kind of how we go, and it's so important to remember not to let go of God when it is going good, instead of being grateful and saying, thank you so much, Lord. But for me, this was a time in my life where something happened that was really difficult. And it drew me in. It drew my relationship to God to a point where we were really in a relationship. Not just, yes, I'm a Christian. I go to church and I believe in God. And I mean, I've always had a living relationship to God. But, at certain times in your life, you get drawn in and I think you really realize how close you want to be. So basically where I was at was, I was working crazy much at this cafe and as a barista. And one of our main things was we need to get out of the apartment where we were in right now. We had Elliot, our son, who was going on 5, and Ellie Mae, who is, now she's 3, then she was 2. We have a Chihuahua and a cat. Our cat is actually bigger than our dog, so they get along pretty good. We were 5 stories up in a 2-bedroom apartment, and it just was not working. I mean, our kids were climbing the walls, and we were climbing the walls. And, you had the whole thing with the balcony. You're worried about the kids getting out and getting hurt, or, I mean, it was just, we need to move to something bigger, something that's more child-friendly, and that just suits our lives better. So I was working like crazy. David, my husband, was working like crazy, and we were just sort of caught up in all of that, so that we would be able to, move somewhere bigger. And that was really a blessing, looking back at things. I was saying before, we see the smaller picture. God sees the big. He sees the whole. And he knew that this was something that we really needed. Aside from working in the coffee shop, I do a lot of voiceover work. And generally when working with voiceover stuff, commercials, anything, the summer months tend to be really slow. July tends to be kind of dead. I mean, just not a lot happening, not a lot of income for me during the summer months. And that's usually a bit of a stressor. This summer, or this past summer, I should say, when I was still working in the coffee shop, I got a bunch of work in when I was on vacation. I got some people that were calling like, oh, could you do this? And I had the equipment with me, so I sent it. We were actually in Finland at the time with our family, but I did the work, which brought in some unexpected money at the time, because I was like, oh, this is really strange. We usually don't have a lot in July coming in work-wise. And So that was like, okay, that's a pretty cool blessing. Thanks God. And then the people that bought our apartment, um, they were like, okay, could you guys move out a bit earlier? And the duplex that we bought would not be finished because it was being built. It would not be finished till for us to move in, I think till September 7th or something like that. And so we said, okay, sure, we can do that. We can move in with my parents for 6 weeks. It's doable. They've got a big house and we all fit in there. So we came back from Finland. I'd done all this extra work and I was back at my job at the coffee shop. And we were staying at my parents' house. It was so good because we had the chance, we had the opportunity to get everything settled. We got everything fixed in our apartment, got everything out of there, moved into mom and dad's. And life, the machinery keeps rolling. And one, night after night, ever since the spring, Elliot had been having growing pains. And we had called, we'd called the children's, or, what we in Sweden, which is where I live, call the BBC, the Barnavårdscentral, the children's care facility, the hospital for kids. And we'd said, is this normal? He's really hurting. And they were like, oh, it's normal. Kids that age, they have growing pains. Don't worry about it. Just take an aspirin, sort of. And so, we'd given him aspirin and stuff like that. But he'd been taken to not wanting to walk. And, kids can be, kids can be whiny. I can say that. Kids can be whiny and you're like, oh, geez, and he'd be like, oh, I don't want to walk, carry me, okay, fine, a lot of bruises, but it was summertime. So, kids run around and they get bruises, it happens. But things were just getting worse. And I told David one night when Elliot came into us and wanted to sleep in our bed, and he spent the entire night just, whining and just kind of not doing good because he said his legs hurt, and so that day David was going to work from home. We were at my mom and dad's place, so I guess working from their place. And I said, I need to go into work now, but could you please take him by the doctor? And because we need to get this checked out. This isn't normal. This is not okay. So David took Elliot to the hospital, and they took some blood tests, and they said, oh, it could be that he has some fluids in his hip. But we don't have the x-ray stuff here, so why don't you guys go to Löwenströmska, which is a hospital that was like 20 minutes away, and get some x-rays done. So David and Elliot got in the car and they started going down to Lövet, and while they're still in the car, the doctor calls David on his phone and he says, there's some stuff in the blood work, please do go and get the x-ray done, but when you've done that, I want you to go into Stockholm and go into the Astrid Lindgren's Child Hospital, because there's some stuff that came up in the blood work. That in itself, I think, kind of makes you go, okay. That just doesn't feel. It feels a little bit out of the norm. And so I'm at work, David calls me, tells me what's going on, and I'm kind of worried. And they get the x-rays done, and then they head into Karolinska. And when they're there, they say, it might be an inflammation in the hip, but, we need to do some more blood tests. We need to run some more samples. So and as everything tends to be in the Swedish hospital system or care system or whatever, things take a long time. So at this point, my parents had gotten Ellie Mae from preschool, and I came to the hospital straight after work because I worked in Stockholm, in the city. We live pretty close by we live pretty close to the city. So for us, it wasn't a big deal. So I came and they said, you know what, we want you to stay overnight. Another, kind of warning, light bulb goes up in your head, and you go, oh, okay. You want us to stay overnight because he might have an inflammation in his hip? I don't know. It just felt a bit off, and the doctor came in, and I remember she was asking, she said, so do you feel like he's been paler than usual? And to be fair enough, I was like, I don't know, because I'm a redhead. Elliot's a redhead. We don't get tanned in the summer. I'm pale as a ghost year around. If I get some sun, I get freckles, or I get burnt, and then I'm white again as a ghost. So, geez, well, Elliot's always pale, so I don't know. David went home to take care of Ellie Mae, and I spent the night. And after that, the next day, they told us that the doctor asked the other family that we were sharing a room with if they could just, please leave the room. And they said, well, we found some immature blood cells, I think is how she put it, in Elliot's blood. And that usually points to it being something serious, and we didn't know at this time, we didn't know exactly what it was we were looking at. They needed to run more tests. We're freaking out at this point. I mean, what as a parent, how do you react? It's like, okay, is my son dying? Is this something, is he gonna be here next week at all? Or is this, what's going on? And, everything just, your entire world just stops. Everything that up till then had been, I remember praying to God about this relationship issue at work that I was going through. And I remember saying, God, this is the toughest thing I've ever been through. I don't know how to deal with it. It was so trivial. I called work and I said, you know what? I don't know when or if I'm going to be back. I'm in the hospital with my son. They say that it might be leukemia. We don't know. I don't know anything. Everything just felt so strange. You're kind of in this bubble of what on earth is going on? How can people be going on with their lives around this? How can things be on TV? How come the TV schedule is going on as always? How come bus traffic is still going? Like, everything should be stopping right now because everything's just crashing down. In the middle of all that, we did tests. We were so happy and so relieved to find out that, oh, thank goodness, it's, the easy ALL, the most common form of child leukemia. And leukemia is still leukemia, it's not a picnic. And they told us, at the hospital, they said, it's going to be a rough road. It's going to be really rough. But there's a sort of everyday routine that grows out of this too. Everything becomes normal. I mean, that sounds really strange, but and in the first 6 months were the worst. It's the entire treatment plan for ALL leukemia in Sweden, in Scandinavia, I think, is 2.5 years. Whereas the first 6 months are the most intense. Elliot was going through really, really rough chemo and side effects from his medicine and, losing your hair and just all the side effects from the medicine were really wearing down on him and on us as parents. It was horrible to see your child feeling that sick. In the middle of all of this, we were still living at my parents' house. And our daughter, Ellie Mae, her life could sort of go on being as it had been, because Grandma and Grandpa could pick her up from school. Mommy and Daddy kind of came, because one of us would sleep with Elliot at the hospital and one of us would be at home, and then we'd trade off. But it was such a blessing to have Mom and Dad and to be able to be there. And then we moved into our new house, and that was such a blessing. It's just one of those situations where you look back and you go, you know what? All I could see at the time was the little picture. God knew that come August, Jesse's not going to be able to work so much. David's not going to be able to work, because we were home. Both David and I were home for the first 6 months of Elliot being sick, because there's just no other way to do it. With all the constant treatments and being in the hospital and just trying to balance everything. So it was such a blessing. God really knew what we needed. We needed to get out of that apartment. We needed a new home that would work in the situation that we were in. I needed work so that we had some kind of financial buffer. And that's why, I look back at July and I go, you know what? God was really looking out for us there. And that was so amazing. And just the support that we received from people around us, from our congregation and friends and family, it's been amazing. I think that looking back at everything, something that I know Matt Redman has a worship song called You Never Let Go. And the lyrics are, oh Lord, you never let go. Through the calm, through the storm, you never let go of me. Every high and every low. And that's just, I think that's, now I need to wrap it up a little bit. There's more to come. But through the highs, which this year really has been. It's been highs where I remember the first time Elliot came back and we all four of us had dinner together, it felt so epic. How can dinner feel epic? But it felt epic. We were having meatballs and macaroni and it was awesome because the four of us were there together and Elliot was sitting at the table. He wasn't on the couch, all curled up and feeling terrible. He was still not feeling good, but all of us were together. And I think through the highs and through the lows, being able to embrace your relationship with God and say, God, I need you right now. I can't do this right now. And knowing He doesn't let go. He's there. He's working through this with you. But also celebrating, your relationship with God through the highs as well. And being thankful and being able to say, wow, thank you so much for being that person that sees the bigger picture, that sees everything. It's been invaluable to me this year. It's been the most important thing in my life. And I think just celebrating life, and one of my favorite authors, Stacey Eldridge, and I think she actually got it from somewhere else. She quoted somebody once that and said, your life is an occasion, rise to it. But I also think, I'd like to add, your life is an occasion, celebrate it, rise to the occasion of your life, but also celebrate it through the highs and through the lows. Thank you so much for listening. This actually turned out way longer than I thought it would, but I'm really happy that you tuned in, and talk to you next week.